On August 19, 1945, 4 days after Japan surrendered, a single battleship sat in Tokyo Bay, surrounded by the entire Allied fleet. Admirals from Britain, Australia, and the Soviet Union looked at it with a mixture of awe and fear. Not because it was Japanese, because it was American. USS Iowa, BB-61, the lead ship of the most powerful class of battleships ever built by the United States. 887 feet long, 58,000 tons fully loaded, 9 16-inch guns that could hurl a 2,700-pound shell 24 miles with accuracy measured in yards, armor plating up to 17 inches thick, and a top speed of 33 knots, faster than most cruisers. The Iowa class wasn't just powerful, it was overwhelming. So dominant that when it appeared in any theater of war, the enemy changed tactics. Japanese commanders ordered their forces to avoid engagement. German U-boat captains refused to surface within 50 miles. And Allied planners worried what would happen if ships like this fell into the wrong hands. Because Iowa and her sister ships, New Jersey, Missouri, and Wisconsin, represented something terrifying. Not just firepower, not just armor, but the industrial capacity to build 4 identical floating fortresses in less than 4 years, to crew them with 2,700 men each, to fuel them, arm them, and deploy them across 2 oceans simultaneously. And when the war ended, the question wasn't whether these ships were powerful. Everyone knew that. The question was what to do with weapons so devastating that even your allies feared them. Ships designed to sink anything afloat, including each other. This is the story of the Iowa-class battleships, the most feared warships of World War II, and why they terrified everyone who saw them.
The Iowa class was born from a failure. In 1936, the Washington Naval Treaty, which limited battleship construction, expired. Immediately, every major naval power began designing bigger, heavier, more powerful ships. Japan started Yamato, the largest battleship ever built. Britain began King George V class. Germany launched Bismarck. The United States had a problem. American battleships were powerful but slow. The previous class, North Carolina and South Dakota, topped out at 27 knots. That was standard for battleships. But the U.S. Navy needed speed. Fast carriers were the future, and battleships needed to keep up, to escort carriers, to screen them from enemy surface threats. So in 1938, the Navy issued requirements for a new class. It had to maintain the 16-inch guns and heavy armor of existing battleships, but it also had to reach 33 knots. That was cruiser speed. No battleship in the world could do that.
The armor scheme was revolutionary. Instead of layering armor uniformly, designers concentrated it where it mattered. The citadel, the central section containing magazines and machinery, had 12.1 inches of side armor sloped at 19 degrees. That slope increased effective thickness to over 17 inches against shellfire. Deck armor was 6 inches over machinery spaces. Turret faceplates were 17 inches thick. Conning tower walls were 17.3 inches. But here's the genius. The bow and stern had minimal armor, just enough to keep out fragments and small caliber shells. That saved weight, allowed for speed, and relied on the principle that in battle, you point your armored citadel at the enemy. You don't let them shoot your unprotected ends. The main battery was 9 16-inch by 50 caliber Mark 7 guns, 3 triple turrets, 2 forward, 1 aft. Each gun weighed 239,000 pounds. Each barrel was 66 feet long, and each could fire a 2,700-pound armor-piercing shell at 2,500 feet per second. That's Mach 2.3, faster than most rifle bullets. The shells were devastating. At 20,000 yards, they could penetrate 20 inches of armor plate. That's thicker than any battleship's belt armor except Yamato. and accuracy was surgical. Fire control systems used analog computers, radar ranging, and gyroscopic stabilization. In trials, Iowa hit a target 28,000 yards away on the first salvo. That's 16 miles. You couldn't see the target from the ship. Only radar could. Secondary armament was 25-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns. They could engage surface targets or aircraft. Rate of fire was 15 rounds per minute per gun. 300 shells in the air every minute. And unlike earlier battleships, Iowa had radar-directed fire control for these guns too. At night, in fog, in smoke, Iowa could shoot accurately. The enemy couldn't. Then there was the anti-aircraft suite. By 1945, Iowa bristled with 80 40mm Bofors guns and 49 20mm Alarcon cannons. A curtain of steel against kamikaze attacks. Gunners trained to track targets moving at 300 knots, and with proximity-fused shells, they didn't need direct hits. Near misses were enough. Power came from 8 Babcock and Wilcox boilers feeding 4 General Electric steam turbines. Total output, 212,000 shaft horsepower. That drove 4 propellers, each 18 feet in diameter. At full power, Iowa could reach 35 knots in trials. Officially rated at 33 knots, but in combat, captains pushed her faster. That combination, firepower, armor, and speed, made Iowa unprecedented. No battleship could catch her, no cruiser could fight her, and no destroyer wanted to. USS Iowa commissioned on February 22, 1943. Within months, she was in the Atlantic, escorting convoys and hunting German surface raiders. But her first real test came in August 1943, carrying President Franklin D. Roosevelt to the Tehran Conference. Roosevelt chose Iowa specifically, the newest, fastest, most powerful battleship in the fleet. A statement to Churchill and Stalin. This is American industrial power. This is what we can build while fighting a 2-ocean war. And this is just one of 4.
The voyage was tense. German U-boats were hunting. Luftwaffe long-range bombers patrolled the approaches to North Africa. Iowa's crew stayed at battle stations for days, but nothing attacked. The reputation preceded her. Intelligence intercepts later revealed German Naval Command ordered U-boats to avoid engagement with Iowa-class battleships unless circumstances were overwhelmingly favorable. They weren't worth the risk. In January 1944, Iowa transferred to the Pacific, the real war. Her first combat action was the Marshall Islands campaign. Iowa's role was shore bombardment. Her 16-inch guns hammered Japanese fortifications on Kwajalein and Eniwetok. Each shell delivered 1,900 pounds of high explosive. Bunkers disintegrated. Artillery positions vanished. Defenders reported the bombardment as the most terrifying experience of the war. But shore bombardment wasn't Iowa's primary mission. She was a carrier escort, part of Task Force 58, the fast carrier task force that would dominate the Pacific. Iowa's job was to protect carriers from Japanese surface raids, and in February 1944, that nearly happened.
During the truck raid, Japanese command dispatched a cruiser force to intercept the American carriers. Iowa and her sister New Jersey, which had joined the fleet, moved to screen. The Japanese detected them on radar. 2 Iowa-class battleships steaming at 30 knots, guns trained outward. The Japanese cruisers turned around. They didn't engage. Didn't even try. The sight of 2 Iowas was enough. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the Fifth Fleet, later wrote, "The Iowa-class battleships provide more than firepower. They provide psychological dominance. The enemy sees them and breaks off. Our allies see them and relax. That's worth more than armor." The Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944 tested that theory. Japanese carriers launched massive airstrikes. Over 400 aircraft headed toward the American fleet. Iowa's anti-aircraft guns opened fire at 12 miles. Radar-directed 5-inch shells detonated among the formations. 40mm Bofors shredded anything that got close. In 3 hours, Iowa's guns contributed to 30 confirmed kills. Not a single bomb or torpedo hit her. But the most dramatic moment came in October 1944, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Iowa wasn't present for the famous battleship duel at Surigao Strait, but she was with Task Force 34, hunting the Japanese center force after it retreated through San Bernardino Strait. Admiral Halsey wanted Iowa and New Jersey to catch the Japanese battleships Yamato and Nagato. For hours, it looked like the ultimate showdown. The two most powerful American battleships versus the two largest Japanese battleships. Yamato's 18-inch guns versus Iowa's 16-inch. Armor versus speed. But the Japanese escaped, retreated into squalls and bad weather. Iowa never got the shot. Admiral Halsey later admitted frustration. Iowa could have taken Yamato, he wrote in his memoir. Our fire control was better, our speed was better, and our damage control was infinitely better. I wanted that fight. Whether Iowa could actually have sunk Yamato remains debated. Yamato's armor was thicker, her guns were bigger, but Iowa was faster, more maneuverable, and had radar fire control. In daylight at long range, Iowa had every advantage. The fight never happened. But the fact that American commanders wanted it and Japanese commanders avoided it tells you everything.
By 1945, Japan's conventional naval power was shattered, but a new threat emerged: kamikazes, suicide aircraft packed with explosives, flown by pilots willing to die to sink a ship, and battleships were priority targets. On April 11, 1945, during the Okinawa campaign, Iowa faced her first kamikaze attack. Radar detected incoming aircraft at 40 miles. Combat Air Patrol intercepted most, but 3 broke through, diving at 350 knots, weaving through flak. Iowa's anti-aircraft guns opened fire at 8 miles. The 5-inch guns created a wall of bursting shells. The 40mm Bofors tracked and fired. Tracers lit the sky. 2 kamikazes disintegrated in midair. The third kept coming, straight at the bridge superstructure. At 800 yards, 20mm Oerlikon gunners opened fire, point blank. A stream of shells stitched across the aircraft's fuselage. The left wing tore off. The plane rolled, missed the superstructure by 50 feet, and crashed into the water alongside the hull. The explosion shook the ship. Shrapnel peppered the deck. But no penetration, no casualties.
Captain John McCrea later wrote in the action report, "The level of anti-aircraft fire this ship can produce is difficult to comprehend until witnessed. We put over 1,200 rounds into the air in under 3 minutes. Nothing survives that." But other ships weren't as lucky. Smaller vessels, destroyers and cruisers, took hits. Kamikazes sank dozens, and the fear grew. If one got through Iowa's defenses, what would happen? A 500-pound bomb carried by a diving aircraft hitting the deck? Could the armor hold? Tests conducted after the war answered that. A kamikaze hitting Iowa's armored deck would penetrate 2 to 3 inches. Not enough to reach the magazines or machinery spaces below 6 inches of armor. The explosion would kill crew on deck, damage equipment, but not sink the ship. Iowa was designed to take punishment, and kamikazes, for all their terror, didn't carry enough explosive to threaten a battleship's survival. That invulnerability created a doctrine. Iowa and her sisters were positioned as the outer defense for carriers. Kamikazes would target the battleships first, the biggest, most threatening ships, and the battleships would absorb or destroy the attack, saving the carriers.
It worked. Throughout Okinawa, Iowa shot down 11 confirmed aircraft, assisted in 17 more, took no hits, no casualties from enemy action, and the carriers behind her remained operational. But the psychological toll on Iowa's crew was real. Months of general quarters, hours at battle stations, watching kamikazes dive at your ship, watching them explode midair or slam into nearby destroyers. knowing that every day, every mission could be the one where something gets through. One sailor, interviewed decades later, described it, "You don't sleep. You eat at your station, you watch the sky, and you trust the guns. Because if the guns fail, you die. That's it. There's no luck, just math. Enough bullets in the air, and nothing gets through." Iowa's guns didn't fail. The math held. And when the war ended, Iowa had fired 3,112 16-inch shells, 22,829 5-inch shells, and over 100,000 rounds of smaller caliber. None of it at another battleship. All of it at aircraft, shore targets, and threats that never closed to gun range.
The Iowa class didn't just terrify enemies. It worried allies. And the reason was simple: power imbalance. In 1945, Britain's Royal Navy was exhausted. Years of convoy duty, Atlantic battles, and Mediterranean campaigns had worn ships and crews to the breaking point. Britain's newest battleships, King George V class, were capable, but they were slower than Iowa, less heavily armed, and older. And Britain had 4 of them. America had 4 Iowas, plus older battleships, plus hundreds of other ships. At the Yalta Conference in February 1945, Winston Churchill privately expressed concern to Admiral Andrew Cunningham, First Sea Lord. "If America decides to dominate the seas post-war, what can we do? Their Iowa class alone outguns anything we have." Cunningham's response, recorded in declassified notes, was blunt. Nothing. We can do nothing. We cannot build ships like that anymore. And even if we could, we cannot crew or fuel them. The Americans have won the naval war. Not just against Japan, against everyone.
That wasn't paranoia. It was strategic reality. The Iowa class represented industrial capacity Britain couldn't match. Each ship required 3 million man-hours to build, tens of thousands of tons of steel, advanced fire control systems, radar, and manufacturing precision that only American shipyards could deliver at scale. And America built 4 in less than 4 years, while also building Essex-class carriers, destroyers, submarines, and Liberty ships by the hundreds. The scale was incomprehensible to other nations. The Soviet Union had similar concerns. Stalin wanted a navy. Post-war dominance required sea power. But Soviet shipyards were primitive compared to American. The best Soviet battleship design, Sovietsky Soyuz class, was never completed. Laid down in 1938, construction stopped when Germany invaded. And even if finished, it would have been inferior to Iowa. Slower, less advanced, less capable. Soviet naval architects toured Iowa in 1945 as part of the Allied victory celebrations. Their reports, declassified in the 1990s, are filled with admiration and anxiety. The Americans have built a ship that cannot be defeated by any existing naval vessel. The fire control is beyond our capability. The speed is unmatched. And they have 4. That wasn't paranoia. It was strategic reality. The Iowa class represented industrial capacity Britain couldn't match. Each ship required 3 million man-hours to build, tens of thousands of tons of steel, advanced fire control systems, radar, and manufacturing precision that only American shipyards could deliver at scale. And America built 4 in less than 4 years, while also building Essex-class carriers, destroyers, submarines, and Liberty ships by the hundreds. The scale was incomprehensible to other nations. The Soviet Union had similar concerns. Stalin wanted a navy. Post-war dominance required sea power. But Soviet shipyards were primitive compared to American. The best Soviet battleship design, Sovietsky Soyuz class, was never completed. Laid down in 1938, construction stopped when Germany invaded. And even if finished, it would have been inferior to Iowa, slower, less advanced, less capable. Soviet naval architects toured Iowa in 1945 as part of the Allied victory celebrations. Their reports, declassified in the 1990s, are filled with admiration and anxiety.
The Americans have built a ship that cannot be defeated by any existing naval vessel. The fire control is beyond our capability, the speed is unmatched, and they have 4.
Today, all 4 Iowa-class battleships are museum ships. Iowa in Los Angeles, New Jersey in Camden, Missouri in Pearl Harbor, Wisconsin in Norfolk. You can walk their decks, stand in the turrets, see the 16-inch guns up close. And they're still intimidating. Even tied to a pier, rusting, decades inactive, they dominate. The sheer size, the armor, the guns. You stand next to a 16-inch barrel and realize it's taller than you, wider than your arm span, and there are 9 of them. But the real legacy isn't physical. It's strategic. The Iowa class proved that battleships, designed and built correctly, could be fast, heavily armed, and survivable. They proved that industrial capacity wins wars, and they proved that overwhelming power, even without using it, shapes outcomes. Japan surrendered on USS Missouri, not on a carrier, not in a conference room, on a battleship. The symbolism was deliberate. This ship represents American power, industrial, military, unmatched. You fought it, you lost. Here's where you sign.